That's right. Bear down, Bears fans. It's time for another edition of the Chicago Bears podcast, Bears Banter, powered by Second City Gridiron. Bill Zimmerman with you, and my, oh my, do we have a lot to talk about today. The Arizona Cardinals game feels like it was about 4 weeks ago, not just because of what's happening in the world the last 2 days, but because what's happening with the Chicago Bears as well. So this podcast for 2 weeks was a beacon of hope and a beacon of positivity. And because the Chicago Bears are the Chicago Bears, they will shred it into little itty bitty pieces and light it on fire and then stomp on the ashes, because that's what this franchise does. And that's where we are today. We are going to be joined by a good guest today, David Kaplan of ESPN 1000. Great day to have David on. Plenty to talk about with him, as this Chicago Bears team has a lot swirling around it here. And we're going to dive right into it. And we're going to dive right into it with some news that broke today on Wednesday, recording this on Wednesday morning. Broke this morning from Brad Biggs of the Chicago Tribune. We're going to talk about this, and then we're going to talk about how this impacts Caleb Williams. We'll maybe talk about the Cardinals game. I'm sure we've heard enough about Matt Eberflus's boneheaded decisions to try and murder Caleb Williams, and all our joy. So before we get into any of that, let's talk about the news from Brad Biggs, which is that he had previously reported, and we use that a lot on this podcast and a lot in my writing on Windy City Gridiron, that Matt Eberflus's contract was only 4 years, not 5. Now, if you've seen the evolution of coaching contracts, they were 4-year contracts forever. And then recently, in the last few years, they started getting bumped up to 5-year contracts on those initial contracts. Now we're even starting to see some in the 6-year range. But for those last few years here, it was 5 years. But Matt Eberflus's contract, according to Brad Biggs, was only a 4-year deal. Now, that was a huge piece of information, because that opens the door to potentially moving on for Matt Eberflus much sooner than anticipated. But on his Wednesday morning mailbag, Brad Biggs walked back that statement and said he now believes, from what he was told, so you got to figure someone at Hallis Hall, from what he was told, that contract extension, that contract is actually a 5-year deal. And that Matt Eberflus is in the 3rd year of a 5-year deal, not a 4-year deal, a 5-year deal. Why is that so massive? Money. That's why that's massive. Now, we know Matt Eberflus is in the ballpark of $6 to $7 million a year. So if they were going to fire Matt Eberflus after just 2 seasons, to do the smart thing, not the smart thing that the fans knew, the smart thing that the media knew, that former coaches knew, that the league knew, everybody knew, you have a number 1 pick like Caleb Williams, you line him up with an offensive coach. It wasn't hard. It's not like we were thinking outside the box. It's pretty simple. But the Chicago Bears said, let's hold on to Matt Eberflus. And now we know they had about 20 million reasons why they wanted to do that. Now, Brad Biggs went on to say that he doesn't think money is going to factor in to keeping Matt Eberflus around. And to that, I say bull honky, because there's no way that Kevin Warren and Ryan Poles didn't understand the concept of lining up an offensive coach with a number 1 overall rookie quarterback, the best quarterback prospect the Chicago Bears have literally ever had in 105 years of football. There is no way that they didn't understand that concept. I had someone tell me that Matt Eberflus being let go was never on the table after last season. And I didn't want to believe it, because I'd also been told that they were evaluating everything. Well, maybe they were evaluating everything, meant everything on the coaching staff other than Matt Eberflus. But when I'm told by someone that wasn't really on the table, when he has 3 years remaining on his deal, suddenly that makes a lot of sense now, doesn't it? So if Brad Biggs wants to sit there and say money won't be a factor in deciding if they're going to let him go with 2 years remaining on his deal, look, I told you last week with Tyreek Stevenson that actions are going to speak louder than words. I'm going to have to say the same thing for the Bears organization. actions speak louder than words, because this is how this franchise operates. Once in the history of the franchise has this team fired a coach with more than 1 year remaining on his contract. That coach was Mark Trestman. He had 2 years remaining on his deal. It was a 4-year deal. He was fired after 2 years, and they did do it. Why? Because the situation was 100% untenable. The players hated him. There were fights in the locker room. There was no way they could have Mark Trestman return to that team. That locker room would not have survived. George McCaskey knew he had to do it and regrettably fired him with 2 years remaining on his contract. So there is precedent that they can do it, but will they do it? That's the question, because the only reason Trestman was gone is because there was no way that it could come back. Now, maybe Matt Eberflus loses the locker room. I hate using that term, but maybe Matt Eberflus loses the locker room, and we have a similar situation here this year. We will see. I think Matt Eberflus is a better coach than Mark Trestman. That's not saying much, but I do think it's far less likely that there's going to be some sort of locker room revolt. Although I have said in the last couple of weeks that I feel like something's bubbling below the surface, and now you're really seeing it bubble up. The playing on Sunday against Arizona was uninspired, not just the coaching, but the effort the players had out there as well. DJ Moore literally quit on a play. I understand he might have tweaked a hamstring or injured something in his leg. I hear other people, oh, well, he stepped out of bounds, so that was the right thing to do, so Caleb Williams would know he's not a target. Guys, he walked off the field. Caleb Williams was scrambling for his life, and he had his back to the play, walking to the bench. Don't tell me this. If he was smart, he would have turned around and actually watched the play if he cared. DJ Moore is miserable out there, and I think it is cascading around to the rest of the players right now. There is a problem in that locker room. I'm not saying he's lost the locker room. I'm saying there's a problem in the locker room. Now, winning cures a lot of ails. I do think they're going to beat the Patriots. We'll talk about it here at the end of the podcast, but I still don't think that's going to matter much with what's coming up the back half, and I just don't see how this team is going to navigate that very well. I don't see it at all. I think it's going to be a major problem. We will see what happens as this goes forward. But again, I am expecting a second half collapse here because I am just not seeing the puzzle pieces fitting well. So while we talk about Matt Eberflus here, let's talk about, of course, the boneheaded decision on the Arizona Cardinals before we move into what I want to talk about, and that's Caleb Williams' development and how potentially stunted this could be thanks to the Chicago Bears' stupidity. All right? Matt Eberflus had a terrible game. The touchdown run at the end of the first half again proves that this man does not know how to navigate a football game. You know, I watched that Chiefs Monday night game against Tampa. Close game, back and forth, decisions about whether they should go for two, timeouts being used, all these different things. And I thought to myself, and I tweeted it, could you imagine if Matt Eberflus had to navigate a game like this? Could you imagine? He'd be lost out there. He couldn't handle something like that. That wouldn't even have been in the realm of possibility that he could have kept them in the game there. That's what we're talking about. When you call pass rush, when the other team is trying to run out the clock, when you are not running balanced defenses to try and, like, he doesn't understand what the situations call for. And it's becoming more and more clear. When you allow a touchdown run to their third string running back, mind you, not James Conner, they had their third string running back in. Just think about the personnel that were out there that they allowed to run for 50 yards for a touchdown. When you don't understand that situation at the end of the half, when you don't understand the importance of the second to last play against the Commanders and how that set you up to lose via Hail Mary, you don't understand how to navigate a football game. So then we go a step further that you're down three touchdowns, not two touchdowns, two two-point conversions and a field goal, 3 touchdowns with 2 minutes to go. You're like, let's trot Caleb Williams out there. Let's not put Tyson Bagent out there. Let's trot Caleb Williams out there and then claim he needed reps operating the 2-minute offense. You know, Matt, you can't be this dumb. You really, really can't. Every time you open your mouth, you just are stupid. And I don't like to say that. I don't like to just denigrate someone and be like, he's a moron. But you need to prove to me that you're not. because these comments that you're making are not helping your case, sir. You know, that play didn't matter against the Washington Commanders. Dan Quinn said, oh, by the way, that was the play of the game. That actually set us up for the Hail Mary. Saying, oh, we needed Caleb Williams to get reps in the 2-minute drill. Did you really? Did you really? Or are you just not thinking about repercussions about what could happen? Now, it doesn't look like Caleb's hurt significantly. Just got banged up a little bit. Bears escaped disaster. But if Caleb Williams got hurt even for a month before he could come back, like that's a fireable offense on the spot to me. That's how egregious of a decision that is. But he doesn't get it. And he continues to make decisions. Now we have to not worry about him making decisions that are going to potentially hurt the chances of them winning games. Now we have to worry about him making decisions that are just going to hurt the players. This is where we're at with Matt Eberflus. And now the idea that he may stick around for another year because he's got a 5-year contract. I hope Brad Biggs is right and money doesn't play into it, but money certainly played into it last season. It absolutely did. You can't convince me otherwise that 3 years remaining on a contract was only due to the fact that Ryan Poles really liked him. Really? I don't believe it. So now we sit here and let's talk about the Caleb Williams development before we get to David Kaplan. Because all we know, like the playoffs would have been great, 10-7 would have been great. We see that fleeting right out the door, right? Even if they beat the Patriots and they're 5-4, we understand just how tall of an order it's going to be to try and navigate the back half here. We got to talk about it. Like with how the NFC is, 10-7 may not get you in. 11-6 would, I'm sure, get you in because enough teams would lose. That means the Bears would have to go 6-2. That is an impossibility. 5-3 is almost an impossibility as well. 4-4 is a stretch. 4-4, they go 9-8. There is no chance that 9-8 is going to get them in the playoffs. Not a chance in hell. So that's over. That's gone with. So now we sit here and go, all that matters is Caleb Williams' development. Meanwhile, Dan Orlovsky, who I just crushed for never criticizing anyone, puts together a piece about how wonky Shane Waldron's concepts are and how he's just setting up Caleb Williams to fail time and time again. And Dan made a lot of good points. He made a lot of good points as to how they are screwing this up. Poor passing concepts. And yeah, he criticized Caleb Williams on a couple decisions, but overall, this was a lot more about how poor the pass plays are that Caleb Williams has to operate in. All right. So let's talk about coaching stability for quarterback development. I wrote about it. So if you want to look at it a little bit more, because I'm not going to list every quarterback I've looked at here on a podcast. That's going to get boring. But if you go to my Hot Take Tuesday column, it's tweeted on my at Bill T. Zimmerman Twitter feed. And of course, Windy City Gridiron, you can check it out there. Hot Take Tuesday. That is the column, obviously came out on Tuesday. So when we look at quarterback development, I looked at two things. I looked at the Super Bowl era. 25 best quarterbacks. Now, again, it's my judgment, but again, it still drives the point home. If there's one quarterback, you're like, oh, you shouldn't have this guy in the top 25. You should have this guy in the top 25. It's really an irrelevant. The top 25 quarterbacks drafted in the Super Bowl era. And then I looked at the top 10 quarterbacks currently in the NFL. So we're going to talk about the all-time list first here. All right. I thought the 25 best quarterbacks. And again, you could probably, if we just sat down and you know enough history to know a little bit about 60s, 70s, and 80s football, you and I are going to sit down and we're probably going to agree on 22 or 23. We're talking Tom Brady, Troy Aikman, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Montana, Peyton Manning, Dan Marino, John Elway. Like, you know the list. You know, I put Eli Manning on there. Maybe you're like, oh, Eli's not a top 25 quarterback. I put Russell Wilson on there. Maybe you disagree about Russell Wilson. But regardless, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about 25 quarterbacks that are considered great quarterbacks, because that's what I'm looking for. Because the goal with Caleb Williams is to be great. Like, if Caleb Williams is the 11th or 12th best quarterback in the league, that's going to be the best thing the Bears have ever had. But that's still going to be disappointing for what we think Caleb Williams could be in this league. So when we're looking at quarterback play, I want great. So that's what I looked at. 25 best quarterbacks of the Super Bowl era that I would say are great quarterbacks. All right. 19 of those quarterbacks had the same coach the first 3 years, same coaching staff, stability, their first 3 years in the league. That is a critical component to quarterback development. We talk about it all the time. That's why we know how important it is to line up an offensive coach with a new quarterback, because you don't want to have to deal with firing coaches in the middle of a young quarterback's development. They need to learn a new offense. If they fire out the whole regime, here comes the new players you have to get acclimated to, new teammates, new terminology. Everything changes, and that just makes everything more complicated for a quarterback. So you sit there and say, all right, well, you're saying there's 19. That means 6 did have coaching changes early. Yes, they did. Let's talk about those 6. Those 6 are Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, Dan Fouts, the old Chargers quarterback, Jim Kelly, Steve Young, and Drew Brees. Now, here's what I think is interesting about those 6 quarterbacks. All right. They didn't play early when coaches got fired, except for a couple of them. So let's go over this. Brett Favre, Falcons, traded. He didn't play when he was with the Falcons. Then he gets traded to Mike Holmgren and the Packers. Then he starts playing. So when Brett Favre started actually playing meaningful reps, he had stability at the head coaching position. Aaron Rodgers, they went from Mike Sherman to Mike McCarthy after Aaron Rodgers' rookie season, but Aaron Rodgers didn't play. So yes, there are certain things that the quarterback has to relearn, but they are not having to relearn like muscle memory. They're not involved to the point of 16 games and hundreds of snaps over the course of a season. That's far different on the quarterback. Aaron Rodgers sat, and then once he started playing under Mike McCarthy, head coach stability. Drew Brees, same thing, sat with Mike Riley. He's gone. Marty Schottenheimer comes in. Drew Brees has consistent stability for multiple years, and then, of course, goes to the Saints with Sean Payton. Here's another one. Steve Young. He went to the USFL, comes to Tampa Bay, complete mess. Everyone thinks he's a bust. What happens? Bill Walsh gets him, sits him for 4 years before Steve Young finally starts playing. And guess what? Head coach stability. You see what I'm getting at here? Now there's 2 that doesn't really fit. Dan Fouts and Jim Kelly. Let's talk about these 2. Dan Fouts, awful to start his career. 5 years. He was a terrible record. It wasn't obviously completely his fault. The team around him as well. 34 touchdowns, 57 interceptions, which even for the 70s is awful. What happens? Don Coryell, Hall of Fame offensive mind, a guru, the modern passing attack. Don Coryell comes in, becomes the Chargers head coach. He develops Dan Fouts into a Hall of Fame caliber quarterback. But Dan Fouts had 5 years of being awful. Caleb Williams, it says 2024. You don't have that kind of leash. So that gets thrown out where you sit there and say, well, Dan Fouts had years to develop. Caleb Williams isn't going to have that kind of leash. So then we get Jim Kelly. And Jim Kelly's another unique one because Jim Kelly went to the USFL in the early 80s after he was drafted by Buffalo in 1983. Didn't want to go to Buffalo. He was very good in the USFL right out of the gate. Jack Pardee was his coach. 2 years in, the USFL folds, and Jim Kelly has to go to Buffalo, where Marv Levy takes over as head coach during his rookie season, and then Jim Kelly becomes a Pro Bowl quarterback under Marv Levy. Of course, the rest of his career with Marv Levy, head coach stability. But Jim Kelly, of those 25 quarterbacks, Jim Kelly is the only one where you can sit there and say he played immediately, had a coaching change, but it was after 2 years, and went on to great success. Now, what's interesting, and like I said, that was after 2 years. And again, this is not about Matt Eberflus and if he should stay. This is about why Matt Eberflus needed to go last year. Do not confuse the two. This is not a Matt Eberflus should stay. This is why he should have been let go after 2 seasons. If Caleb Williams, when I compare him to these 25 great quarterbacks of the Super Bowl era, if Caleb Williams becomes great, becomes that level, like borderline Hall of Fame great or Hall of Fame caliber great, he will be the first quarterback in NFL history to play right away, have a coaching change after 1 season, and become great. There is not an example of a quarterback who has done that to this point. And if you're a guy who's sitting there going, I don't care about Dan Fouts, I don't care about Joe Namath or Roger Staubach or Terry Bradshaw, we're all also on this list. I care about the modern quarterbacks, which, by the way, of those 25 quarterbacks, I had Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow. Those guys, or not Joe Burrow, I'm sorry, Josh Allen were on the list. I didn't have, Joe Burrow did not make the cut, not enough years. But I also said, all right, let's look at the modern era then. Let's look at who I would consider the top 10 quarterbacks in the league today. All right. And one quarterback that didn't make that list is Trevor Lawrence, which I think is interesting because everyone thought Trevor Lawrence was a can't miss prospect. And he's kind of missing right now, even though he got paid. Why? Urban Meyer disaster, coaching changes, instability, not the kind of growth curve you want to see. There should be no surprise that Trevor Lawrence isn't panning out exactly how you would have hoped. But again, here's the 10 quarterbacks I had in the league right now. You want to disagree a little? Go ahead, do your own research. That's fine. Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, CJ Stroud, Justin Herbert, Dak Prescott, Jared Goff, Jordan Love, and Jalen Hurts. That's my top 10 right now. Never would have thought I would have Jared Goff in the top 10, but him and Ben Johnson are an all-time heater, and I've got to be fair. He's a top 10 quarterback right now. All right? So of those 10, CJ Stroud year 2, so we're projecting a little with CJ Stroud, but there's no reason to think something's going to change here. All 10 of those quarterbacks for the first 3 years they were in the league, same coaching staff, same head coach, same coaching staff. Again, what are we seeing? We're seeing stability. Now, you're like, well, there's 3 that weren't, right? Those 3 are Goff, Jalen Hurts, and Justin Herbert. Now, if you want to sit there and go, okay, so 30% of them are great quarterbacks and didn't have the coaching stability. Jalen Hurts has gone backwards, and everyone's talking about how he is not the same quarterback he was a couple years ago. Coaching changes probably made a big part of it. Shane Steichen not being there, a big part of it. Again, are we noticing what's going on? Doug Peterson's the guy who drafts him. Then he's got Shane Steichen. Then Steichen gets a head coaching. Do you see what's happening here with Jalen Hurts? Then we can also look at Jared Goff. Jared Goff was kind of the butt of a lot of jokes for a big chunk of his career. Jared Goff, yeah, Jeff Fisher. Then he gets Sean McVay. Sean McVay goes, I can't win with this guy, casts him aside for Matthew Stafford, and immediately wins a Super Bowl. Now Goff has really found it with Ben Johnson and is playing great. But do we want to wait until Caleb Williams is 29 until he figures it out? Again, we're talking about like a Dan Fouts kind of leash. There's a reason that Jared Goff is having success on a different team than the one that drafted him, because the leashes are never that freaking long anymore. And that leaves one guy, poor Justin Herbert, who is on his 3rd coach in 5 years. It has not gone well. It was Anthony Lynn, Brandon Staley, and of course now Jim Harbaugh. And of course, Jim Harbaugh only wants to run the football, and Justin Herbert having a nice, efficient season, but not putting up the big gaudy numbers. Now, Justin Herbert has managed to beat the odds of the coaching and still manage to be a very good quarterback in this league. Justin Herbert, great? I don't know if Justin Herbert's great. I think we would all agree he's very good. He's a borderline top 5, top 6 quarterback in the league. But again, he hasn't had opportunities to really perform at a high level because his football team has been so bad around him because of coaching instability. So if you want to sit there and say that of the 25 quarterbacks all time, Super Bowl era, don't matter, and the 10 quarterbacks currently in the league, and the only one that had the coach fired after a year and has continued to succeed is Justin Herbert. And you want to hang your hat on Justin Herbert and go, it doesn't matter what the Bears have done. Caleb Williams can succeed, because the literal only example of that is Justin Herbert, with a guy who had played right away, had his coach fired after one season, and is having success with the same team. That is literally the only example since the mid-1960s. We're talking about before Woodstock. That's how long this era has been. Justin Herbert is the lone example. That's it. And that's what the Bears have done to Caleb Williams. They have put him in a situation where almost no quarterback has been able to overcome these problems. But the Chicago Bears don't learn from their mistakes. And that brings us to the cliche as we wrap up here before we get to David Kaplan. That cliche from Albert Einstein. The definition of insanity is repeating the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. And we sit there and laugh at the Chicago Bears and say that is the definition of insanity, because they did it to Rex Grossman. They fired Dick Duran. They brought in Lovie Smith. They did it to Mitch Trubisky. They did it to Justin Fields. And they may very well be headed this direction with Caleb Williams. And it's the right decision. Don't get me wrong. I am not saying that they need to keep Matt Eberflus at this point. I am saying they have created this mess. And that when we sit here and laugh at the Chicago Bears and say there's the definition of insanity, that they're going to, that they keep trying to develop quarterbacks this way, the definition of insanity is on us for thinking the Chicago Bears might actually learn from their previous mistakes, because there is nothing that shows us that they have one iota. David Kaplan joins me next. Bill Zimmerman, Bears Banter. We'll be right back. All right, welcome back into the podcast. Excited to talk to this man, because this man has opinions and he has information. And right now with the Chicago Bears, we need both. He is David Kaplan, of course, the Cap Man on Twitter, and of course, Cap and J Hood Show on ESPN 1000 in the mornings, and of course, his YouTube page where you can get all his sports recaps. And he joins me now. Cap, Bill Zimmerman, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you for the nice introduction. The recap, REKAP on YouTube. So just search that. You'll find me. We get content 7 days a week.
Yeah, it's great content. And like I said, you're a great person to talk to because of the information you have. Obviously, you've had your pulse on the sports, Chicago sports landscape for a long time, and you're opinionated. And this Chicago Bears team right now, I mean, talk about a turn of events here. 4-2 going into the bye. Everyone's feeling great, and things have really hit a rough patch, and people are concerned not just about getting out of this, but now for the rest of the season. So let me start here with you. Where are you on Matt Eberflus as a coach, and where are you in terms of if he can be the guy to lead this team to where Bears fans hope it can get?
Look, he's a nice man. He is. I hear nothing but good things about him as a person. But this is pro sports. Did you win or did you lose? And I feel like he's had 4 games over the last 2 seasons, 2.5, whatever it is, that he's had a 91% or better chance of coming out victorious. He's lost every one of them. The loss to the Washington Commanders was a coaching loss. We had him on the day after that game. And when I said, Coach, why would you just hand them 13 yards? I'm watching the game. Tony Romo says, you can't run a Hail Mary from here with 6 seconds left. There's not a human being alive that can throw the ball that far in the air.
Yep.
He said, you need 12 to 15 yards. Well, if Tony Romo's sitting up there, or me, who was watching the game on an airplane coming home from a vacation, and I'm watching it, and I'm thinking, would you guys come up there not pressing at all? What are we doing here, Coach? And then they get the 13 yards free. Like, here you go, take the 13 yards. And now you don't take a timeout, you have 3 of them. They're not like the old days when you take your cell phone minutes and you roll them over every month. Oh, I only used 30% of my minutes. I'm rolling the other 70% over. No, that's not how it works. So as I look at him, I look at that play. Tyreek Stevenson's off in the corner playing with the fans, and you don't take a timeout. And when I asked him, Coach, why not take a timeout there? He said, we didn't need a timeout. We had everything set up the way we wanted it. And I said, Coach, with all due respect, I got to push back. You didn't. You had Tyreek Stevenson off in the corner. You had 3 timeouts. What are we doing here? And he didn't like the question, obviously. But that's a fact. So if I owned the team, and again, this is not me trying to be a personal attack on him. This is just business. If I owned the team, he would be gone. He would not make it to next season. In fact, he would probably already be gone. I just feel like you get out coached. I just feel like the play at the end of the first half against the Arizona Cardinals, while he's not out there tackling, he said, we're in the wrong coverage there. I had a pass blitz on. Again, should Kevin Byard have funneled him back to the middle? 100%. I don't put it all on Matt, but I just don't see a guy who is, in my opinion, a leader of 53 men. And if I got Bill Zimmerman playing for me and he isn't taking care of his business, you're talking to a guy who was a college coach and an NBA scout. You never attack personally. I don't go to you and go, you're a loser, you the player. But I will go to you and go, what the F are you doing, Bill?
Sure.
Jesus Christ. You got to hold the edge, or you got to funnel someone to the middle, or you got to do this, or you got to do that. I just don't think he's a guy that commands the room of 53 men. I don't.
And I really think that that's becoming evident. And look, I've had a problem with his accountability in press conferences dating back to last year. He always put it on execution. He never really put it on the coaches. Changed his tune a little bit towards the end of the year. We're seeing this again, like you just said with the Washington game. I know he did a little bit better this last week against Arizona, but Cap, to me, I'm at a point where I'm starting to wonder if something's bubbling under the surface here with the players and him. And I don't know if maybe accountability is the reason, because I mean, you got DJ Moore quitting on a play. You got him talking to a radio station in Chicago saying, I want to say no when they ask if he's lost the locker room. The effort, I thought, against Arizona was really flat. Clearly something was lingering there from the Washington game. Do you feel like I know you said you question him as the leader of men here. Do you feel that maybe the locker room is feeling the same way?
I'm sure, when you lose 2 games the way they have, one you get trucked, and the first one you basically have a 96 point whatever percent chance to win, and you make bad coaching decisions and you stack them on top of each other, and the next thing you know, you lose a football game and you become a national joke for how you defended that play. Look, DJ Moore spoke today. I sat here in my office waiting to talk to you and brought the Bears press conference up. DJ said, look, I tweaked my ankle on the play. I was already out of bounds, and I went over on the sideline. It was not me quitting on a play. I like DJ Moore. I think he's a damn good football player.
Absolutely.
If he tries to tell me that he is as locked in and aggressive running his routes as he was a year ago or 2 years ago, I'll disagree with him. And I like him. I've interviewed him. I think he's a good dude. There's something, just the whole team, there's something not right.
Yeah, no, I again, like I said, I feel like something's there. And before we get off to some other things here besides Eberflus, obviously I have to ask you about the end of the game, Caleb Williams, the decision to keep him in. Like, I mean, look, I know Bill Belichick was famous for keeping Tom Brady out there up 52-10 and just leaving him out there while everyone's sitting there. What are you doing, Bill? What are you doing, Bill? He never seemed to have an issue with it, and he got away with it, probably because Brady got rid of the ball in 2 seconds every time. But this is a developmental year for Caleb Williams. It's important to make sure he's safe and he's healthy out there. Did you have an issue with the decision to let him play till the end?
1,000% had an issue, and I asked Coach Eberflus about it because I feel like when I do that show with Jonathan Hood, my responsibility is not to him to make it a comfortable interview. My responsibility is to every man, woman, child that is going to work, sitting in their office, at their breakfast table, in school, listening on our podcast. I owe it to them to ask the questions they want answers to, not the questions that make him comfortable. And if it's a good game and they win, all in for, hey, coach, what did we do for dinner last night when you got back? No problem. When you lose games the way they've lost games, I have to ask you, coach, what are you doing having your rookie franchise quarterback, who got sacked 6 times, by the way, has been hit more than any quarterback that the Bears have had in a long, long time, getting the ever-living H beaten out of him? Why would you have him in there? And then when he says, well, we wanted to work on the 2-minute drill. Hold on a minute. Your left tackle's out. Your right tackle's out. You are as banged up as any team on the offensive line, and the game's over. It's 29-9. That's bullshit, in my opinion. So I disagree with keeping him out on the field.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And so let me get to this. Like you said, this is football. This is a business, and we're going to play hypothetical here. And that hypothetical is Eberflus's job security. Now, of course, look, they beat the Patriots. They get a little momentum. They go 9-8, 10-7. Maybe make the playoffs. This all changes. But right now we're talking about a team that looks flat. They've lost a couple in a row. And let me ask you, as someone who knows the Bears organization well and how they operate. And before I bring this up, I got to bring up Brad Biggs, who previously had reported about 10, 11 months ago that he was under the impression that Matt Eberflus was under a 4-year deal. Today, in his Q&A column, he said he actually doesn't believe that anymore, and he's been told that it's a 5-year deal. Now, that obviously changes things tremendously when you think about the...
Why? Why does that change anything?
Well, because the way the Chicago Bears operate, Mark Trestman is literally the only coach in the history of the franchise to be fired with 2 years remaining on his contract.
Okay, but here we are now. The latest valuations on Forbes is that franchise is north of $5 billion, approaching
I get it.
$6 billion. Billion with a B, like Bill. And I don't want to hear that the $5 or $6 million a year that guy makes, that is tip money to an NFL franchise. And that would be like me saying, I'm sitting here in our studios that I built for my YouTube channel. That'd be like me saying, well, I bought these cameras that are all around the studio here, and they're blurry. You can't see me. Well, you know what? We paid $20,000 for the cameras. Sorry, got to use them, and nobody could see me. Or the mic. I saw like this. You could. No, I made a bad purchase. It's a sunk cost. Pay the man his money if you make that decision. I'm not sitting here advocating for them to fire him today. If I was the owner, I would change coaches. I've said that. But what I'm saying to you is the money should be irrelevant.
You're preaching to the choir. I agree with you. But let me ask you this. Knowing how the McCaskies have operated, and I understand Kevin Warren's there, and we're told that things are operating differently now. If Eberflus was on a 5-year deal, from all it looks like Ryan Poles wanted to retain him. He's been his number one supporter. But do you think if he wanted to remove him, that would have been approved with 3 years left on the contract?
I do think it would have been approved.
That
said, I think it's hard for a general manager to walk in to your home and go, Bill, we're going to tear this thing apart. I need a partner to be here with me and take all the hits in a Chicago market that is, there's New York, Boston, Philly, and Chicago. And I think he said to him, look, I know we're not going to win next year. We're going to probably be the worst team in the league. We're probably not going to win the second year. By the third year, we might have it turned. Then they got the historic lucky break of all, made the great trade with Carolina, got Caleb, added some other talent, and I think Poles is really good at his job. Really hard to beg a guy to take a job, or at least ask a guy to take a job, and then tell him, I need a partner, I need someone who's lockstep with me, that we have an eye on the future. Because most coaches, you're talking to an X1, I got to not worry about winning today. He didn't want that. He wanted someone who's looking to build a relationship, support each other, all that. Oh, wow. Now we're getting the number one pick, and I'm going to basically tell you, bye-bye, see you later. So I think he felt some loyalty. Novel quality, admirable, super cool. In the end, He's not good enough as a coach.
Yeah, and look, last thing I'll say on this, and like I said, I agree with you. It shouldn't matter. They have a huge valuation. I know cash flow at Hallis Hall isn't what it is, with some of the other teams, but that shouldn't be an issue for a coach. You're not talking about signing a $150 million player. You're talking about signing a coach at 7, 8, 10 million a year. But where I see how the McCaskies have operated in the past, if you fire Matt Eberflus and he's making, $6 million a year, whatever it might be, and then you bring in, let's say you try and get a Ben Johnson and he's in demand and you got to pay him 10, 11 million a year. And now they're paying a coach who's not there, plus the coach who's there, $17, $18 million for 2 years. I'll believe it when I see it. And I hope I do see it if it needs to happen. But I will believe it when I see it based on how I've seen this franchise operate. That's all I got to say.
Yeah, it's fair. But I would tell you, when they needed to go get the best player on the market and give him $92 million, Julius Peppers, done. When they made a trade for Montez Sweat and he needed $98 million plus some bonuses, done. I mean,
yeah, they paid Cutler, they paid Mack.
They pay guys and paid Khalil Mack. There's a great example. Jay Cutler got his money. When they have to spend, they do. When Ryan Pace, not Poles, Pace, went to George and said, look, the building we have out here is antiquated. We're going to lose free agents if we don't modernize. And they built $100 million building. And I was told by Ryan Pace, he said, when I went to George said, okay, done, build it. It was that easy. Now, right. Do they do everything right? They do not, obviously. I think the biggest problem they have that they got to fix the culture in the building, man. They just do. There's too much losing, too much comfortability about losing.
Yeah. All right. Well, you're making me feel a little better about that, but yeah, we'll see what happens here. And like I said, maybe things get turned around here. We're only at the midway point of the season, but in terms of turning things around, let's talk about one other coach, and that's Shane Waldron. And look, I was defending him early in the season. I said, look, there's half the offense is new pieces. They need time to gel. He needs to get comfortable with these players. He's got a rookie quarterback who's just getting thrown into the fire there, and he's trying to figure things out. They obviously gave Caleb Williams a lot of responsibility right out of the gate in terms of protections, formations, audibling at the line. They gave him a lot, and he was going to take time as well here. But it got humming, and I understand the defenses weren't as good as they have been the last couple weeks. But we're seeing things regress significantly. Dan Orlovsky was on ESPN talking about these woeful, passing concepts where everyone's clustered together. Saw the same problem with Matt Nagy at times, where all the receivers were bunched in one spot and there was no one to throw to. So we've seen this song and dance before, David. I just don't understand how this team, time and time again, other than maybe 1 year with Mark Trestman, just continues to struggle to find some sort of modern, cohesive offense.
Yeah, it's a fair point. I was talking with Dan today. We've had a really good relationship. Look, Caleb has to wear some of it. He does. I watched the All-22. Everyone's watching election returns, and, I would flip for a sec. Who's winning? Okay. I watch the All-22 every week, and I sat and watched it. He decides to take a really tough throw to go to Keenan Allen in the end zone, and right in front of him is DJ Moore, who could walk in from the 4-yard line. Walk in. Dude, drop the ball off. Take some of the easier throws, but he tries to play hero ball. That's what happens with rookie quarterbacks. So some of it, I'll tell you, Shane Waldron's not the devil, but he's also not very good. He's okay, but some of it falls at the feet of bad offensive line, and then the quarterback last week. I thought the Jacksonville game, anybody out there, go back and pull up the Jacksonville game. Tommy Waddle, I thought, put it best. That's the best single performance grading-wise when he went through the All-22 of a Bears quarterback he's seen in more than a decade. He said it was sensational, one of the best he's ever watched. That said, Caleb was awful against Arizona.
Yeah, and he wasn't good against Washington either. Good at the end, the last 5 minutes or so of the game. But yeah,
the whole last quarter, he was really good.
Yeah, but he's absolutely struggling there as well. So, let me finish with this, and let me ask you about Caleb Williams. Obviously, development isn't linear. We knew we was going to have regression points and everything. Got a game coming up here against the Patriots. It's a good defense, but obviously it is not a good team. There should be some opportunities there for him to have some success. At this point of the season, we're halfway through his rookie year. Are you satisfied with what you've seen? Are you excited? Are you concerned? Where are you at the Caleb Williams development?
Disappointed in the last couple of weeks, other than the fourth quarter against Washington. Would draft him 100 times out of 100 again. Really, really encouraged about where I think this thing is headed. I haven't seen a Bears quarterback process like he does scanning the field.
Agreed.
He needs to stop trying to extend plays and, try to play hero ball too much. And he's got to have better deep ball accuracy. His deep ball accuracy has been less than underwhelming. It has not been good at all. But he would tell you that. He said that to the media today. I've got to be better. And again, he's a rookie. Peyton Manning, I think, had 28 interceptions as a rookie, and everyone went, what a horrible draft pick. He's only one of the 3 or 4 best quarterbacks, top 5 of all time. So patience. But Ryan Poles, who I love, better fix his offensive line in the offseason.
Yeah, absolutely. That is a major issue. So I'm going to ask you one more thing, see if you think it matters potentially as much as I do. And this is not for, retaining Matt Eberflus or whatever. It's just an observation I've made. So I did some number crunching. I took who I thought was the top 25 quarterbacks of the Super Bowl era, and I looked at the top 10 quarterbacks currently in the NFL. And again, my subjectivity, but I think most people would agree with about 90% of the list. And of quarterbacks that have had coaching changes after year one, on that entire list, the only one who is on that list is Justin Herbert on the current top 10. Not any of the top 25 quarterbacks had a coaching change after year one and made it there unless they were sitting. So like a guy like Aaron Rodgers, they went from Sherman to Mike McCarthy. He was sitting. He wasn't actually playing yet. Do you think that having a massive change like that to a young quarterback with new terminology, new offense, everything that comes with it, is that something that you would be concerned if the Bears made a change would potentially stunt Caleb Williams' growth?
I don't think it would stunt his growth because I believe in him that much, but it certainly would shine the light again that, let's see, we went from John Fox, Mitchell Trubisky, one year. Here comes Matt Nagy. We went Matt Nagy, Justin Fields to Eberflus, and now we do it again. At some point,
Rex Grossman had it the same way. It was Dick Geron to Lovie Smith, if you want to go back that far.
Correct. But at some point you got to get off the hamster wheel. You just do. You got to go, I'm going to pair my head coach, whoever that is, whether it's a badass like Mike Vrabel, who's a really good football coach, and will hold that room accountable. Like, you want to fix your culture and hold people accountable? He may be an asshole, but that guy can flat out hold people accountable. Good football coach. If you go, I got to get an offensive guy. I don't know if Ben Johnson can be a good head coach. Everyone's like, we got to get Ben Johnson. How's he any different than what Matt Nagy was when he left Kansas City to come here?
That's fair.
He's the same freaking guy. Yeah, their offense looks great. Well, guess what? They got the best right tackle in football. They got a great center in Frank Ragnow. They got Taylor Decker, 3 first-round picks on the O-line. They got Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamison Williams, Sam Laporta, David Montgomery, Jahmyr Gibbs. I mean, sweet mother of God, that team's loaded. Love their head coach. When Dan Campbell rolled in there, nobody went, wow, there's a quarterback guru. And guess what? Jared Goff looks pretty good.
Yes, he does. All right. Well, there he is. He's at the Capman on Twitter. And of course, the recaps on YouTube. Just search him there. You'll find him there. And everybody knows Cap and Jay Hood on ESPN 1000 in the mornings. Cap, thanks for the interview. That was great. You put my mind at ease on a few things. I appreciate it. We'll talk to you again soon.
Let's go win a football game or two.
All right, there he is, David Kaplan. That's a good spot. Lots of energy, lots of good information, lots of good opinions. You can't ask for anything more than what Cap gave you right there. That was a great spot. You know what else you can't ask for anything more from? Underdog Fantasy. That's right. Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to join over 5 million fans that are already playing Underdog. With their champs game, you could win money by just making entries on your favorite players, and you could win 1,000 times your money just by choosing higher or lower on player stats like passing yards, interceptions, touchdowns, and more. Now, we know we brought this up before. The promo code for Second City Gridiron, because Underdog is the best place to play champions. So sign up and deposit now using promo code CITY, CITY, to get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. This season, Underdog is going to be running a special promo or bonus almost every single day, like profit boosts. Pump up your winnings in just a tap when you apply the boost to eligible entries. Discounts. You'll get adjusted projections on certain players' stats to give you a better shot at a big W. You also will get free picks. They're basically a sure thing. A player just has to get higher than 0.5 insert stat for that selection to win. Like any stat, you just have to get 0.5 higher than that, plus all new users get free picks. I'm using Underdog Fantasy. It's a lot of fun. I love using the app. It's easy. It's accessible, and you can get out, just download it today and get right on it. So download the app and use the code CITY, C-I-T-Y. And like I said, get that $1,000 in bonus cash instantly. Promo code is CITY, C-I-T-Y. Again, select higher or lower on your favorite players and cash in on Underdog. Every player, any stat you like, passing yards, rushing yards, anything, just pick higher or lower, and you can be a winner on Underdog. Now, here you go. You've got to be 18 or over. That's 19 or over in Alabama and Nebraska, 19 and over in Colorado for some of the games, and 21 and over in Massachusetts and Arizona. You have to be present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply. Void in Colorado. Now, if you're concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.npcgambling.org. Arizona, that's 1-800-NEXT-STEP, which is 1-800-639-8783, or you can text Next Step to 53342. New York, that's the 24/7 Hope line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY, or text HOPE-NY 467-369. Again, Underdog Fantasy, love that they're part of Second City Gridiron, and we hope you give them a play today. Now, we will wrap up with the mailbag like we always do. We've got a ton to get to. I'll get to as many of these as we can. So here we go. Let's start with Chris Armstrong. We all knew this would happen, but wanted to believe it would be different this time. So my question is, who buys out the McCaskies? And Chris, I'm going to tell you this. I don't think anybody. I know everyone says, oh, they don't have money. They're going to have to sell, yada, yada. I don't think they're going anywhere. I think they understand the George Halas legacy and keeping it in the George Halas family. And even though most of these McCaskies are disinterested, I just don't see it happening. Now, I do wonder as this team is looking for ways to get more cash. That's why they bought Arlington Heights, right? They're trying to figure out ways to get better cash flow into this team. Here's what I do wonder. If that doesn't happen soon, and if they go to the city rather than Arlington Heights, they're certainly not going to have the same levels of cash flow because they're going to be sharing profits with the city and everything else. I do wonder about that new deal that the NFL has with private equity. You can sell up to 5% of the team, or I'm sorry, 10% of the team to private equity firms. And of course, that would give you a huge influx in cash. Now, if you think about it here, I think the Bears are valued about $6.5 billion, $7 billion right now. That was last year. Now the value is going to go up again. And then, of course, you can kind of, in essence, overcharge because you know that you're getting an appreciating asset that you're going to be selling 10% of. So the Bears could right now sell 10% of the franchise to a private equity firm and get like $800 million in cash. And obviously that would do massive things for what they could do to their cash flow situation. So I do wonder if that's something that they consider doing here down the line to get some added cash. I mean, they're going to need cash to put on hold. Assuming Caleb Williams gets a big contract, they're going to need cash for that. Who knows what's going on with the stadium? You know, obviously they can sell Arlington Heights. there's a whole lot of different aspects of things. If the Bears operate with a better cash flow situation, you can pay out bonuses in a better structure, put less money on the cap, and in essence have more money going to the players than the salary cap allocates. Bears don't do that much because they don't put out the huge bonuses. So that's one thing I think to consider. But no, I don't think the McCaskies are going anywhere. So how about this one? At Pepe Silva 05. Even if this team loses out, do you think there's any shot Poles is fired too? Well, first of all, Eberflus has to get fired. They're 4-4, and I'm going to guess that's not really something they're considering too much at Hallis Hall right now. They're trying to figure out how to right the ship after the 2-game losing streak. We know where we are as fans. We understand that this isn't going to go in the right direction. But NFL franchises don't think that way. The Bears sit there right now, they go 4-4, and they're understanding, look, we beat Detroit, we beat Minnesota, we beat Green Bay. We're going to catch these teams. That's the mindset at Hallis Hall right now, not if Eberflus is getting fired. Now, if it does go south, and you said losing out, if this team loses out and goes 4-13, all hell breaks loose. But again, I think they're beating the Patriots this week. So, and I don't think they're going to lose out. I do think there's enough talent on this team that they're going to find another win or two after the Patriots game. I think this team's probably going like 7-10 at this point, and that's a far cry from 10-7. That three game swing is a lot, but I think that's far more likely than losing out. If they lose out, all hell breaks loose, and who knows what happens. I think that's certainly Ryan Poles will get fired if they go 4-13. But if they more likely do something like go 7-10, I don't think Ryan Poles gets fired. I think Ryan Poles has another opportunity to pick another coach, and then they go from there because they've got a lot of pieces in place. And look, you can question Ryan Poles because I know we love to talk about the trade, and the trade was fantastic, and it has set the team up in a fantastic way. But eliminate, and I know this is unfair to do to Ryan Poles, but eliminate the trade and then assess Ryan Poles as general manager. And it's going to be a very mediocre return. Like, it's not terrible. He has found some good players, but it is not knock your socks off. There's a lot of free agent mistakes in there. There's a lot of, mismanaged money in certain aspects. The Chase Claypool deal, there's some questionable stuff there. So it's not a bad resume, but it's not a home run resume. But when you put the trade in there, and again, Ryan Poles made the trade, he gets credit for it. You do question exactly where we are without that trade. So that's something to keep in mind. Now, we got a couple here that are the same from Kurt and Charlie B. Basically, Ben Johnson, Ben Albright talking about Ben Johnson, Albert Breer talking about Ben Johnson. Do you think he would take the job? What do people think of him as a head coach? Well, Albert Breer says that he thinks Ben Johnson was interested in the Bears job. And I think that's accurate because the one thing I heard about Ben Johnson is that he wanted the right landing spot. Now, the Washington situation, obviously the Commanders are playing great, and maybe Ben Johnson misassessed the situation there, but maybe he didn't like Jane Daniels. I mean, think about how Ben Johnson operates an offense. Think about how he uses Jared Goff. When you have that in mind, does that scream Jaden Daniels or does that scream Drake May? And maybe he wanted Drake May, and they're like, Jaden Daniels, and he's like, this isn't the spot for me. So something like that could happen. I'm not saying it did. I'm saying that could have happened. Ben Johnson knows he's a hot commodity, and he wants to find the right landing spot. And I'm going to assume he sees how Caleb Williams operates, and he probably thinks he can do great things with Caleb Williams in his style of offense. So I think there's absolutely a chance that Ben Johnson would take the Bears job if it's available. Now, Ben Johnson is going to get a much bigger contract than Matt Eberflus got. He is going to be in command. All right. I got people in my mentions going, he doesn't want that much money. He's a humble guy. Ben Johnson isn't stupid. This is a capitalist society. He is going to be in demand. There are going to be 5, 6, 7 head coaching jobs, and pretty much all of them are going to want Ben Johnson, which means he is not going to take less money to come to the Bears just so he can coach Caleb Williams if the Dallas Cowboys are handing him a bag to go coach Dak Prescott. Think about it. That's going to come into play. So when he's looking at good situations, he's also going to consider the money. Are the Bears willing to pony another year? Now we're guessing Matt Eberflus at 5 years. Are they willing to go to 6? Are they willing to go to 10, 11, $12 million? Because $7, $8 million isn't going to cut it for Ben Johnson. He's going to be the number one guy out there this year, unless it's Bill Belichick. Like, those are the two big guys that are going to be out there in the coaching cycle this year. Mike Vrabel's going to be there. There's some names, but if you want offense, right? If that's what you're looking for, you don't necessarily want the experienced head coach. You want offense, then you're going to want Ben Johnson. And what does the league think of him right now? The league thinks of him as potentially the next big offensive guy. Now, the next big offensive guy doesn't always work out, but right now you're thinking Sean McVay, you're thinking Matt LaFleur, you're thinking that group of head coaches right now. That's where Ben Johnson is in line. His concepts are elite. He is getting guys open, wide open, scheming them open constantly. He has Jared Goff playing in such rhythm and at such a high level of processing speed that Jared Goff doesn't throw in completions anymore. Guy's completing like 85% of his passes the last month. It's insane what he's doing. So yes, Ben Johnson is highly thought of around the league as an offensive mind. Now, as a head coach, that's going to be up in the air. Who does Ben Johnson know around the league in terms of building a staff? That's difficult to do. A lot of these new guys don't necessarily have that. In fact, look at Matt Nagy. They kept Vic Fangio in place for Matt Nagy, so he didn't have to build the defensive staff, and the offensive staff he built sucked. Now, who does Ben Johnson have to come over? I don't know. He hasn't been with a lot of different teams. Shane Waldron been with a couple, 3 different teams. He got to know some people around the league that way. Ben Johnson's career path hasn't been exactly the same. So when that kind of stuff happens, those are also things you have to keep in mind. So that's something I don't even think the league knows right now. I certainly don't have enough information, but I do know the league, he is not only is he a highly respected offensive mind, as a play caller, in terms of being in the rhythm of the game, he is potentially the best in the league. Better than Andy Reid, better than Sean McVay, better than LaFleur. Right now, he is potentially the best in the league at calling plays, which is something Bears fans would be desperate to have, because that is just something they cannot seem to get right. All right. Bears give up 100 yards to Williams, Taylor, Hubbard, and Connor. Is Bears run D a problem? I've been talking about it, and this comes from Siege. I've been talking about that, Siege, all year. Yes, it's a problem. And, this time they were banged up with Montez Sweat, but they've run at Javon Dexter a lot. They're double teaming Andrew Billings. The linebackers do not shed well if the offensive line gets to the second level. Their run defense is not great. They have, I think, the right personnel to fix it. And I don't know exactly what the problem is there with Eric Washington and Matt Eberflus. I think it's fixable as long as they stay healthy, because the one thing is, and I think this does hurt them, especially in the second half, there is a lack of depth on the defensive line. They do not have a lot of guys to rotate in, and therefore guys are playing high percentage of snaps. And when you have guys playing a high percentage of snaps and a game is close or you're trailing, which the Bears obviously have been quite a bit this season, in the second half, when your defensive linemen have played 70, 80% of the snaps, 90% of the snaps in some cases, they are going to be gassed. And when they're gassed, that's when an offensive line pounces. So the lack of depth, I think, is definitely a problem on the offensive line, but it hasn't always been third and fourth quarter stuff. They've had problems in the second quarter as well. So there's scheme involved there as well. And if the Bears are going to right the ship here in the second half and push for the playoffs, that is 100% something that needs to get fixed. All right. Brian Steele Goated says, Bill, this team sucks. The coach is in free fall, trying to save face by finally taking accountability far too late. The veterans on this team are dogging it on film, and we are on our 6-team meeting in week 10. Outside of cleaning house, what is the first step in correcting this? I think the first step in correcting this is a disconnect between the coaches and the players. And these team meetings, something needs to get figured out. And I talked about it after the Commanders game, that I had a concern that lack of coaching accountability was going to be a problem. Like we talked about after the Washington game, Matt Eberflus. Caleb Williams says it should never have come down to a Hail Mary. I didn't execute the offense well enough. Had I played better, it wouldn't have come down to the Hail Mary. So it's on me. Caleb Williams taking accountability. We all know he didn't play well. He takes accountability. Matt Eberflus doesn't. And he finally did Thursday. He goes, I guess it starts with me, right? He finally did it. But he said it, he didn't have any issues with what he did on Sunday, and he doubled down with all of it on Monday. Now, Matt Eberflus was the same way last year. And towards the end of the season, he finally started saying, the coaches got to coach better. He started working that in publicly, but he wasn't saying that originally. And now he's not saying it again. And I'm sorry, if you're seeing your boss go out there and basically say, I'm doing everything right. And last year he was pointing the finger at execution. Even if he's not pointing the finger at execution, when he says, I did everything right, you automatically are saying the coach is telling the media and the fans that the players are screwing up. Now, you tell me if that's not going to cause a disconnect. So Matt Eberflus, Shane Waldron, Washington, Hightower, the whole lot of them need to understand accountability, how to take, and it doesn't matter if they're taking accountability privately in the locker room. I don't know if they are or not, but it doesn't matter if they are privately, if they're not publicly, because publicly is what is making, these players look bad in a lot of ways. And this is the consistent message that Eberflus says to the media. And I don't understand how he doesn't get it. Mike Tomlin stands up there and takes bullets. It doesn't matter how a player screws up. Mike Tomlin says he didn't put him in a position to succeed, basically. Every time. Bullet after bullet after bullet. That's what I think a head coach needs to do. Even if you are annoyed that he doesn't give you the quote, that's what a head coach does. He doesn't put it on the players. Bill Belichick, he didn't give you answers because he didn't put his players, in front of the media to take the lumps. That's not how he operated. So things will not get better unless there is a better synergy in season. And off season, they can come up with nicknames and laugh and joke in OTAs all they want, but no one's getting criticized in OTAs. So the coaches and the players are going to be in a much better headspace. When you get to the season and the coaches aren't taking accountability, that is going to erode the locker room. And I think that's where we are right now. So other than cleaning house, which I think at this point is where it's going to be headed, Brian, but until they get to that point, if they're going to try and fix this, they need a better connection with players and coaches. I don't think they trust Shane Waldron, what he's doing offensively. I don't think they like Matt Eberflus's attitude with the media. And I think it is causing a major disconnect. And look, DJ Moore is miserable out there, right? Like he said a couple side jobs here or there, jabs here or there. He just kind of looks off. He's pouted a little bit. Then he walks off the field. DJ Moore is miserable out there. This guy just signed a contract extension. It wouldn't have shocked me if the guy said, I want out. I want to trade, right? Like, obviously that's not going to happen, and it didn't happen. But that's where we're at with DJ Moore. This guy is miserable. So you think he's the only one? No, they've got issues there, and it is a coaching-player relationship. That is the issue to me. That's what they need to solve. All right, we got one here from Martin. Why did Flus take the blame for the right call this week and take none for back-to-back dumb ones last week? He tripled down last week. Was he told off by his team? Well, Martin, that's what we're talking about here. Lack of accountability. That's where we are with Flus. He's done that all the time. Like, I still remember last year, and I don't remember which game it was. It was a game they lost. The Saints, I think it was. The Saints. He was bragging about the defensive play calls he made in the game. He's like, wasn't that a great play call? Wasn't that a great play call? Who made those calls? I did. Like, and he's trying to make a joke of it, but he's constantly trying to prop himself up. Until this gets solved, I just don't see any way that these relationships are going to get better. Like, they need to pull Matt Eberflus aside and be like, do you understand what accountability is? You ask your players to be held accountable, and you are not accountable. So how are they supposed to respect what you want from them when you don't do it yourself? It is a major problem here. I've been saying it since last year. And we're going to wrap up with this last one here from Evan Lepeau. Is Dave Toub a viable option for head coach? I don't think so. I think the Dave Tobe, train is long past in terms of him being a head coach. I'm just going to look at this right now. He's 62 years old. That's not the age you're really looking to hire a head coach. Now, you want to coach closer to the player's age, have a better connection. Eberflus is a little on the older side in his 50s. You probably want a coach who's in his 40s. A lot of guys are going with coaches in their 30s. And again, I don't want to deal with coordinators. Assuming Eberflus is gone, I don't want to deal with coordinators. I want an offensive-minded head coach. I don't care if it didn't work with Mark Trestman. I didn't care if it didn't work with Matt Nagy. That's what they need. And I'm going to be throwing all my eggs in the Ben Johnson basket until that basket is not available. And speaking of age coming into play there, 38 years old. He'll be 39 during OTAs next year. That's the kind of age you're hitting right now to have a coach come in, connect with the players, and put something together. So that's where we are. Bears fans are frustrated. I'm frustrated. So let's wrap it up with a little prediction. And I think this prediction is going to run counter to everything I've said. And it's mostly because the Patriots stink. Patriots have a bad offensive line. They've got a rookie quarterback. I still think Matt Eberflus has the ability to dial up some plays and some protections and some stunts and some twists that are going to get to coverages. I said protections, coverages that are going to confuse Drake May some and give this offense problems, especially with the porous offensive line that the Patriots have. I think the Patriots defense will cause some problems for the Bears, but I don't think it's anything that they can't at least score some points on and get some things going. Hopefully, they remember Cole Kmet's on the football team. I'm not sitting here saying Cole Kmet's a top 3 tight end in the league, but my God, man, can you work him into the offensive game plan a little bit? Just a little bit. Like, when you throw them the football, they seem to keep the ball moving down the field. So I think Caleb Williams will be better. I mean, Williams was better last week than he was the week before. I think he'll be better than he was against the Cardinals defense as well. I think this Bears team will show a little life. They're back home. They've got a winnable game. I don't think they're going to come out totally flat. I think they win this one. I don't think it's going to be some awesome game where the Bears are humming, but I do think they can win this one like 23-16. And I think they can come away with a victory, get themselves to 5-4, and feel a little bit better before that Packers game, which I just have a feeling that feeling of dread is just coming over me right now with that Packers game. I had so much hope that, by midseason, Caleb was going to be feeling pretty good. The Packers defense wasn't going to be that sharp. It was going to be a middling defense, and the Bears were going to be able to score some points and finally win a football game at home against the Green Bay Packers. I'm not feeling that right now, but let's see what happens. Maybe they go out there and they win 38-16 again, like they did against the Carolina Panthers and the Jacksonville Jaguars, and maybe we can feel a little bit better about this team. But right now, I think they grind out an ugly win, get themselves to 5-4, and then we'll see if they can figure it out for this back half of this schedule, which we know is going to be brutal. It is the toughest in the league. That's going to do it for Bears Banter. We'll talk to you next week. Bear down, everybody. Adios.